I woke up to the sound of honking. Not the usual kind from traffic or farm geese, but a piercing, repetitive screech that sounded like a goose trying to drive a dump truck through a kazoo. I jumped out of bed, flung open the window, and there it was. Karen's golf cart, lights flashing like it was auditioning for a low-budget Fast and Furious spin-off, parked dead center in my barn like it belonged there. The engine was still sputtering, her little HOA flag was fluttering in the wind, and worst of all, it had apparently terrified a raccoon so badly that it crashed through a window trying to escape. That was my first clue something was off. The second clue came when I walked outside in my pajamas, only to find Karen standing at the edge of my property line, arms crossed, with the smug look of a cartoon villain who just pulled the lever to drop someone into a pit. She actually had the nerve to yell out, "You're welcome for the improved aesthetic value." That barn was hideous before my cart arrived. Right then I knew two things. 1, she had done this on purpose. 2, she was about to regret it in a way that involved feathers and national internet humiliation. The barn wasn't just some old wooden shack like Karen imagined. It was a part of my livelihood and my peace. I'm a rural carpenter who does custom woodwork, furniture restoration, and on weekends, repairs vintage tools for fun. I bought this property to get away from HOA madness, yet somehow Karen had managed to drag it back into my life like a cursed magnet of entitled chaos. The barn was where I stored my equipment, lumber, and partially completed client orders. I hadn't even finished organizing the upper loft yet, and now it looked like a retirement home for rogue golf carts. Karen's cart had not only invaded my space but rammed into a rack of antique shutters I'd salvaged last month. One of them was now snapped in half. If Karen had expected me to just roll with this, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The real kicker? Just a few days earlier, Karen had shown up uninvited during one of my yard cleanups, waving a clipboard and introducing herself as the HOA landscape liaison. I had told her, as politely as I could manage while holding a weed whacker, that I wasn't part of the HOA. My property line literally sat 1 foot outside their jurisdiction. Her smile didn't even twitch. She simply said, "Not yet," and then handed me a flyer about community visual cohesion. It featured sample photos of beige fences, beige driveways, and beige flowerbed. Apparently, variety in color was against the HOA's moral code. I thought she was delusional. Now I realized she was also aggressive. The golf cart incident had been brewing, and this was her opening shot. I tried the civil approach first. I walked over, phone in hand, snapped a few photos of the cart in my barn, and told Karen she had exactly 1 hour to move it before I called the sheriff. Her response was to snort like a cartoon pig and declare, "It's not trespassing if it's a shared structure." I blinked, trying to wrap my brain around what fictional version of reality she lived in. She pointed to some outdated property map printed in black and white and held together with a glittery paperclip. According to her, the barn had once belonged to someone who did pay HOA dues, so therefore it had shared historic significance and should be considered community use space. I could barely believe it. She was standing there, hands on hips, literally rewriting property law using a bedazzled binder and the sheer force of delusion. By noon, the cart still hadn't moved. Worse, Karen had emailed the HOA board to say I was illegally detaining her vehicle and damaging its transmission through neglectful barn climate. Not even kidding, that's what she wrote. I only found out because one of my neighbors, Derek, forwarded me the chain of emails with the subject line Karen's going full tilt. The HOA president, a guy named Roy who hadn't been to my property in over a year, responded by suggesting I attend the next compliance review panel to explain myself. I wasn't even a member. I never paid dues. I didn't attend meetings. But they wanted me to justify why a woman parked her battery-operated clown car inside my workspace without permission. That's when the absurdity turned into rage. And that rage found an outlet in the most poetic, petty, and poultry-based revenge plan I had ever conceived. But before we get to the feathers, let's back up. The barn had a history, sure. Built in 1926, it had survived 2 tornadoes and a lightning strike. It had character. I had restored most of it myself. Every beam and brace had a story. So when Karen claimed it was a communal landmark, I nearly choked on my coffee. She didn't care about history. She cared about control. She was the type who made PowerPoint slides about garden gnomes and tried to standardize mailbox colors. If I let this slide, it would only get worse. Today it was the cart. Tomorrow it'd be her hosting a yoga retreat in the hayloft. I gave her one last warning. In writing, I drafted a formal notice, stuck it in a plastic sleeve, and zip-tied it to the steering wheel of her cart. It read, "Unauthorized vehicle parked on private property. Must be removed by 6 p.m. or will be repurposed as agricultural infrastructure." Karen saw me placing it and laughed. I mean really laughed. Head back, arms flailing, like a villain in a soap opera. She called out, "Oh please, what are you gonna do? Turn it into a chicken nest?" Now, I wasn't planning that. Not at first. But the moment she said it, something clicked. That was exactly what I was going to do. If Karen wanted to treat my barn like her personal parking lot, I'd treat her cart like a barn accessory. A very creative, very public, very clucky barn accessory. So I did what any reasonable man with a sense of humor and a grudge would do. I spent the rest of the day drafting a blueprint. Not for a lawsuit. Not for a formal complaint. For a chicken coop. And not just any coop. This would be the most over-the-top, Wi-Fi monitored, solar-heated, nesting box-equipped, Instagram-ready chicken coop ever built inside a golf cart. I made a list of materials. I called my cousin Ray, who owed me a favor after crashing his dirt bike into my shed last spring. I found a poultry auction happening the next town over. The plan was locked in. The gears were turning. Karen had parked her future. And I was about to turn it into the punchline of the year. That night, I stood in the doorway of the barn, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The cart sat there like a smug little robot, oblivious to its fate. My dog curled up beside me, wagging his tail like he could sense the incoming chaos. I scratched behind his ears and said, "You ready for some chickens, boy? Because this cart is about to get clucked." And with that, revenge officially went free range. The next morning, I was at the poultry auction before sunrise, sipping burnt gas station coffee and scanning the pens like a man on a mission. The auctioneer, a wiry guy in overalls named Donnie, didn't even blink when I told him I needed chickens that were visually intimidating but photogenic under direct sunlight. He handed me a card and said aisle 3 had some high-drama hens. That's where I met Beacons, a sassy Rhode Island red with one foot bandaged and a resting face that could curdle milk. She strutted like she owned the place and pecked at my shoelace like it had personally insulted her lineage. I liked her immediately. I walked out with 8 hens, 1 confused-looking rooster, and a big sack of starter feed. As I loaded the birds into the truck, I whispered the plan to Beacons. She blinked once and promptly pooped on the tailgate. I took that as a yes. By the time I got back to the barn, Karen's cart was still there, perfectly untouched, as if waiting to fulfill its destiny. I cleared out the tools and broken shutters from the lower barn floor and set up the base. The golf cart got rolled into the corner, and with Ray's help, we built a wooden ramp up into the front seating area. I used old apple crates to fashion nesting boxes where the golf bags once went. We filled the glove compartment with straw. I took the steering wheel off entirely to give the chickens more space to roost. Ray laughed so hard when I installed the perch bar across the front seat, he nearly fell off the ladder. Karen came by during the setup, sunglasses on, holding a tiny chihuahua that looked like it had survived 3 nervous breakdowns. She didn't even approach the barn. She just stood on the gravel path like a vulture in yoga pants and called out, "I see you're still holding my property hostage." I wiped my hands and said, "No ma'am, your property is being enhanced." She squinted at the golf cart turned half-chicken condo and narrowed her lips into a wrinkled line. "You're going to regret this," she muttered. That was the last thing she said before storming off in a huff, dog trailing behind like it didn't want to be associated with any of this. I wired up the barn with motion sensor cameras. Some aimed directly at the cart, others mounted high to catch wide angles of the full interior. I wasn't just doing this for revenge anymore. At this point, it was performance art. I started live streaming the chickens under the title, Karen's Cart Coop Cam, and set it to chill acoustic music. It was ridiculous, yes, but the stream caught on like wildfire. People tuned in to watch Beacons and her entourage pecking corn off the dashboard or napping in the front seat. Within 3 days, I had 20,000 followers and donations rolling in faster than I expected. I bought more feed, upgraded the lighting, and installed a solar-powered fan system. Karen's golf cart had become the most luxurious poultry residence in town. One of my viewers, an art teacher from Colorado, sent me custom name tags for the chickens. Alongside Beacons, we now had Benjamin Franklin, Cluck Norris, Agatha Christie, Yoko Ono, Amelia Earhart, and Princess Leia. The rooster, a confused but loud gentleman who crowed at 2 a.m. like clockwork, was named Roost Wayne. The name plaques were affixed to the dashboard of the cart with wood glue, and each chicken had its own personality showcase on the livestream overlay. At this point, the Coop had sponsors. It had fan art. It had merch. The HOA board didn't know what to do with any of it. Karen, of course, was livid. She called the board to demand action, claiming my chickens were running an illegal business from within her property. She actually called it vehicle-based foul laundering in her complaint, which got passed around and leaked by a sympathetic board member. Someone posted the PDF to Reddit, and within hours, it was trending. A meme circulated with her quote over a picture of a chicken wearing sunglasses driving a golf cart. I had it printed and hung it on the barn door. Things escalated quickly from there. Karen began patrolling the edge of my property like a hawk with boundary issues. She stood with binoculars, taking pictures of everything. One evening, she stood on a cooler across the street yelling, "How do you sleep at night knowing you've corrupted barn space?" I told her the hens sleep better than I do, and pointed to the coop cam where Amelia Earhart was snoring against the steering wheel. She screamed something incoherent and stomped off again. That became her routine. Show up, shout, storm away. Meanwhile, the chickens clucked on, unbothered, pampered and popular. But then Karen tried to escalate beyond words. She came to the barn at night, thinking nobody would see her, and tried to sneak into the structure. I had installed a pressure sensor mat just inside the door as a joke to trigger the internal lights and camera focus. When she stepped on it, the barn lit up like a stage. All 8 chickens immediately woke up and began squawking. Beacons flapped her wings dramatically and leapt straight at Karen's knees. Karen shrieked, tripped over the ramp, and fell backward into a pile of mulch. All of it was caught in glorious night vision and uploaded before sunrise. The internet went ballistic. Someone added opera music to the footage. Another cut it into a slow-motion Matrix parody. The comments were merciless, calling her the chicken whisperer of chaos. By the end of the week, my barn had become a local attraction. People started driving by to take photos. A food truck even parked outside on Saturday selling egg sandwiches with names like The Karenator and Bach and Cheese. I didn't encourage it, but I didn't stop it either. The more noise there was, the more ridiculous her claim to the cart became. She stopped calling it hers in public and started saying she lent it to the community for artistic reinterpretation. That was her legal cover, but nobody believed it. Especially not when she tried sneaking in again wearing a poncho and sunglasses, thinking she was incognito. Beacons recognized her instantly. I swear that hen has a personal vendetta. The icing on the cake came when a local morning news show asked to do a piece on unexpected farm creativity. They interviewed me in the barn, chickens perched behind me, with the cart in the background fully decorated in streamers and motivational chicken quotes like, "Don't let the HOA cage your dreams." Karen stood outside the whole time, trying to wave down the news van and tell her side of the story. The reporter politely declined. The anchor said, on air, that they didn't usually interview background characters who stormed away mid-shoot. Karen's rage was now boiling under the surface like a volcano made of vinegar and glitter pens. She wasn't giving up. I could see it in the way she started emailing the county, filing code violations, even claiming my barn didn't meet structural standards for poultry. But the cart was hers, and everyone knew it. If she demanded I return it, she'd have to admit to the world that it was her cart that now served as Beacon's egg-laying throne. And Karen wasn't that brave. Not yet. But she was close to snapping. And I had a feeling the next move she made would cross the line between annoying and downright illegal. I just didn't expect how far she'd go to reclaim a cart she never should have parked there in the first place. Karen's next move came like a punchline nobody asked for, but everyone somehow saw coming. On a Tuesday morning, around the time the chickens were usually enjoying their corn mash, and I was reviewing client sketches in the barn, a beat-up white van pulled into my driveway. It had magnetic decals on the doors that read Metro Animal Control Services, except the letters were peeling, and someone had clearly painted over part of the word Metro to cover what used to be Matt's Party Rentals. I stepped out, wiping my hands on a rag, just in time to see a lanky 20-something guy in a polyester uniform hop out of the van holding a butterfly net, a clipboard, and what looked like a Nerf tranquilizer gun. He looked lost, nervous, sweaty, and fake. Before I could say anything, he squinted at me and said, "We're here to collect illegal poultry specimens on behalf of the local homeowners association." Behind him, the back doors of the van opened and out stepped Karen, trying to hide behind a massive pair of sunglasses, holding a rolled-up folder of what she clearly thought were legal documents. I stared at the scene, blinking. The chickens clucked in perfect harmony from inside the barn, as if mocking the absurdity. I asked the guy, "You got ID?" He stammered, said something about being contracted through Suburban Animal Compliance Partners, then muttered that he left his badge in his other van. I told him this wasn't a clown show and stepped forward to take a closer look at his paperwork. That's when he dropped the clipboard, bent over to pick it up, and accidentally fired the dart gun into Karen's shin. She let out a scream that probably echoed 5 counties over. The dart bounced off harmlessly, but the sight of her limping in circles while yelling at her nephew, the fake animal control agent, was something out of a sitcom filmed on a dare. I didn't have to call the sheriff. He showed up on his own. Apparently, someone from the neighborhood had called in a report about suspicious white van activity and a possible hostage chicken situation. Sheriff Dalton was a tall, leathery man with a mustache that commanded attention. He'd known me for years and had bought a reclaimed oak bench from me last fall. When he saw Karen and the van, he didn't even ask for context. He walked up, tilted his hat back, and said, "Karen, are you impersonating government services again?" Her reply was a breathless flurry of nonsense about health codes, barn hazards, unpermitted poultry zones, and a rogue rooster. The sheriff just pointed at the van and asked the fake agent what his name was. The kid practically dissolved. He muttered something about being told there'd be snacks, then sprinted back into the van and peeled off down the road, leaving a trail of feathers from a loose bag in the back. Karen tried to salvage her position, saying she was only conducting a citizen inspection, and that the chickens posed a grave biohazard to the local property values. The sheriff looked at me and asked if I wanted to press charges. I said not yet. I was saving that card. Instead, I handed him the barn cam footage of the entire encounter, including the dart gun moment and Karen's wild accusations. He chuckled the whole time watching the playback, especially the part where Roost Wayne flapped out of the golf cart and startled the kid into dropping his fake credentials. The sheriff took down her name, again, and issued a formal warning. Karen stormed off, humiliated but not beaten. She was spiraling, but she hadn't hit rock bottom yet. Later that evening, I reviewed the security footage for edit. I knew this latest debacle was going viral. I clipped together the best parts, added some dramatic opera music, and uploaded it as Karen's Cluckdown, Animal Control Gone Wild. It hit 500,000 views overnight. People couldn't get enough of her darting mishap or the moment she screamed, "That rooster is threatening me." The fanbase was thriving. Someone made a remix. Another person sent a mini plush version of Beacons. My barn had become the internet's favorite chicken sitcom. But while the world was laughing, Karen was plotting. I noticed new signs staked out along the edge of her yard reading, "Biohazard, do not approach." She started spraying vinegar toward my property line, claiming she was sanitizing the air. I ignored it until she filed another HOA complaint, this time accusing me of running a commercial poultry operation without a business license. She attached screenshots of the livestream and claimed I was financially exploiting livestock within stolen property. That was the first time she formally referred to the golf cart again, suggesting that she was finally about to try reclaiming it through legal pressure. That complaint prompted another HOA meeting. I attended out of pure spite. It was held in a cramped community center decorated like a low-budget dentist office. Karen stood in front of a makeshift slideshow labeled "Poultry-Related Property Damage" and pointed to a blurry photo of Beacons staring into the camera. "This chicken," she announced, "has repeatedly threatened me through nonverbal intimidation." The room fell silent. Then someone in the back snorted. Another chuckled. Finally, the HOA president Roy cleared his throat and asked if she had any actual evidence of property damage. She waved her arms wildly, knocked over her poster board, and shouted, "It's not about damage. It's about moral decay." That's when I stood up and asked the room if they wanted me to share the cam footage from the dart gun incident and the citizen inspection. The board voted 4-1 in my favor to drop the complaint. Karen's face looked like it had eaten a lemon wearing sunglasses. Still, I knew she wasn't done. She had too much entitlement wrapped up in that cart. So I added a new feature to the barn cam stream, something for the drama. I introduced Chicken Court Thursdays, where I played judge and jury in pretend trials featuring the hens, using voiceovers and overlays. The audience voted weekly on whether Karen was guilty of crimes like vehicular squatting, poultry harassment, and false biohazardry. I edited in clips from real HOA meetings, spliced with chicken reactions. One stream topped 1 million viewers. My ad revenue soared. Karen's fury escalated proportionally. Then came the night she tried to reclaim the cart for real. Just after midnight, the camera picked up motion at the side door of the barn. Karen slipped in, dressed in black sweats and holding what looked like a tool belt and a tarp. Her plan was obvious: cover the cart, tow it out, and disappear before morning. But what she hadn't accounted for was the camera tripwire I'd set up earlier that week, which triggered two things at once: the LED barn floodlights and a loudspeaker I'd connected to my laptop. When she stepped forward and touched the cart, the speakers boomed with the sound of a rooster crowing on repeat, at full volume. Roost Wayne joined in for real, echoing the effect. The hens went ballistic. Karen screamed, tripped on the perch ramp, and went sliding across the floor into a pile of feed bags. I woke up to my phone pinging like crazy. The cameras had caught everything and automatically uploaded the footage to my private channel. I watched from my porch as she scrambled out of the barn, clothes covered in straw and what I can only assume was chicken poop, before limping back to her property like a cartoon villain who got too close to the dynamite. I didn't stop her. I didn't have to. The internet would take care of the rest. I edited the footage, added dramatic music, and scheduled the video premiere under the title Operation Foul Play, Karen's Midnight Extraction Mission. It was set to go live at noon the next day. I had no doubt it would break every record yet. What Karen didn't realize was that every step she took only made the story better, funnier, and more humiliating for her. She'd turned a golf cart incident into a full-blown saga, and with every attempt to reclaim her property, she buried herself deeper. The chickens weren't just poultry anymore. They were icons. Her cart wasn't just a vehicle. It was now the centerpiece of a national joke. And Karen? She wasn't just the HOA nuisance. She was the villain in her own never-ending sitcom. The best part? The next episode was already writing itself. Karen didn't show her face for a full 48 hours after her failed midnight raid, and for a moment, I almost thought she'd learned her lesson. But then a massive delivery truck pulled up just outside her house and unloaded 6 industrial-strength floodlights. That same afternoon, she installed them in her backyard, all pointed directly at my barn. By sundown, it looked like the surface of the sun had relocated to rural suburbia. My barn, previously a cozy, softly lit coop with quiet fans and nesting hens, was now lit up like a Hollywood set. Beacons stood in the window like a war general surveying an enemy's movements. The rooster hadn't stopped crowing since the first spotlight fired up. I tried being civil. I knocked on her door. No answer. I emailed the HOA board. They replied with a generic statement about neighborly discretion and the right to install security lighting. But this wasn't security. It was warfare. I couldn't even walk into the barn without squinting like I was being interrogated. So I fought back the only way I knew how, by flipping the whole thing into content. I installed large mirror panels across the side of the barn. Cheap stuff from the salvage yard. It didn't need to look perfect. It just had to bounce those spotlights right back at her second-story windows. The first night it went live, Karen's bedroom lit up like a UFO was parked on her roof. She screamed out the window, "I'll sue you for retinal damage." I called back, "Only if you can spell it." But the escalation didn't stop there. In fact, the mirrored revenge launched a whole new phase of chicken-themed defiance. I added a sunblock mode feature to the livestream, with dramatic music every time the mirrors rotated. Viewers loved it. Donations doubled. One guy in Michigan sent a solar-powered disco ball to install inside the barn. Another viewer from Oregon mailed me chicken sunglasses. I didn't even know they made those, but Beacons wore hers like a queen. Karen, meanwhile, filed yet another HOA complaint, this time citing weaponized light reflections. Roy from the board called me to let me know, and I could hear the barely contained laughter in his voice. He admitted that while they technically couldn't stop either of us, the whole board was watching the stream and had unofficially voted Beacons as HOA president. That gave me an idea. If Karen wanted to keep the war going, I'd make sure the whole world saw it. I built a small drive-thru window on the side of the barn. Nothing fancy, just a little shelf with a slot and a sign that read "Eggs now available," courtesy of Karen's cart. I wasn't selling anything. That would have crossed zoning lines. But I accepted donations and gave away eggs with a printed flyer featuring Karen's face next to a cartoon chicken, under the caption, "Extremely entitled." The local sheriff came by, picked up a carton, and laughed for 10 straight minutes before driving off. The line for eggs got so long on Saturdays that cars wrapped around the block. Someone brought a sign that said, "We stand Benjamin Franklin." Another held up a painting of Karen in cartoon villain form riding a golf cart off a cliff. Then the news got wind of it. A crew from a local station asked to film a segment. I agreed, as long as they blurred the chickens' faces. They thought I was joking. I wasn't. My girls were celebrities now and deserved privacy. Karen saw the news van arrive and immediately lost her mind. She ran out into the street, trying to flag them down, wearing a bathrobe and a head wrap like she'd just escaped from a telenovela. She shouted about legal rights, slander, unauthorized commercial activity. The reporter calmly replied that they were on public property and that the story was human interest, not criminal investigation. Karen shrieked back that chickens weren't human and therefore it was illegal journalism. I don't even know what that means, and neither did the reporter. But the footage ran on the evening news, complete with a shot of Roost Wayne crowing dramatically as Karen flailed in the background. That night, Karen reached her breaking point. I was locking up the barn when I heard the sound of something sloshing. I peeked through the slats and saw Karen holding a giant bucket of pink paint. Before I could react, she hurled it across the front of the barn, coating my freshly sanded wood in dripping neon sludge. She screamed something about vandalism not being vandalism if you're reclaiming property. The irony hit harder than the paint. I ran out, phone already recording, and caught her red-handed, literally. She slipped on a patch of straw, fell backwards, and landed squarely on a bag of feed. One of the chickens, spooked by the chaos, flew directly onto her stomach and sat there like a triumphant goblin. I didn't intervene. I let the camera roll. She flailed. She screeched. The pink paint soaked through her sweatpants. When she finally struggled to her feet, she saw me standing there and hissed, "I'm calling my lawyer." I calmly replied, "Great, I'll send the video to yours too." She stomped off again, soaked in defeat and humiliation. I uploaded the footage under the title, "Karen Goes Full Picasso, Ruins Her Own Property." It hit 2.3 million views in 24 hours. The next HOA board meeting was standing room only. People showed up wearing chicken hat. Someone passed out Team Beacons stickers. Roy stood at the podium and opened with the words, "Before we begin, yes, we've seen the video. Yes, it was hilarious. Now can we please return to actual neighborhood issues?" Karen demanded a vote to condemn my barn as a public nuisance. Roy put it to a vote. It failed 9-1. The one? Karen herself. She started shouting about injustice, favoritism, corruption, and poultry dictatorship. That phrase alone sent half the room into laughter. When I got back home that night, I found something incredible waiting in the barn. One of the chickens, Benjamin Franklin, had laid a perfect double-yolked egg right in the golf cart's cup holder. It felt symbolic. Like even the chickens were in on the joke now. I took a picture, added a golden glow filter, and posted it with the caption, "Proof that entitlement lays golden eggs." It was shared by half a dozen influencers and even made it to a segment on late-night TV. Karen had thrown everything she could at me. Fake animal control, floodlights, late-night theft, buckets of paint, and still came out the laughingstock. Her one original sin, parking that stupid golf cart in my barn, had blossomed into the most beloved chicken-themed internet sensation of the year. And the best part? She couldn't admit it was hers anymore. Because if she did, she'd be claiming ownership of the viral chaos, the egg giveaways, and the rooster who now crowed every morning at 5 a.m. just loud enough for her bedroom window to hear. Still, I knew she had one more move left. She wasn't the type to give up. And I wasn't the type to forget. So I started preparing. Reinforcing the barn lock. Updating the motion sensors. Buying an extra camera. Because whatever she had planned next, it was going to be desperate. And the last thing I wanted was to be unprepared when desperation finally collided with karma. All I had to do was sit back, sip my coffee, and let the chickens keep clucking. They were doing most of the work now anyway. Karen's final act came wrapped in chaos and desperation, just as I expected. By now, the entire neighborhood, the HOA board, and most of the internet knew her golf cart was the punchline of a chicken-themed saga that refused to die. She'd become a living meme, the kind you don't recover from, the kind that shows up in GIFs for years. Yet somehow, instead of fading into the background with a shred of dignity, she went all in, one last swing at rewriting reality. It started with a thick envelope I found wedged in my mailbox, marked in bold letters. Legal notice of property reclamation. Inside was a letter signed by someone claiming to be Karen's property attorney, complete with dramatic language accusing me of grand theft, illegal use of a personal vehicle, and the unauthorized modification of a motorized personal mobility unit. The entire document read like it had been drafted by a soap opera villain trying to pass the bar exam. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it into the chicken feed. I didn't bother responding. I forwarded the whole thing to my real attorney, who replied within minutes that it wasn't worth the postage it was printed on. But I knew it was a signal. Karen was about to escalate beyond HOA complaints, livestream sabotage, and late-night paint raid. This time, she wasn't just coming for the cart. She was coming for the spotlight. And she didn't care if she burned herself in the process. The following weekend, I hosted what I called the Coop Community Celebration, a local thank you event for neighbors who'd supported me through months of absurdity. We set up folding tables outside the barn, offered free cartons of eggs, lemonade, and had a tiny merch table where folks could grab Team Beacons, stickers, pins, and even little plush chickens with sunglasses. The vibe was light, ridiculous, and overwhelmingly positive. Kids posed with the real chickens. Teens live-tweeted the event. Even Roy from the HOA showed up wearing a chicken hat, admitting he was off-duty for the day. Everything was smooth until the news crew arrived. Apparently someone, I wonder who, had tipped off the local news again. Only this time, it wasn't a casual interest piece. This was a live segment. They showed up mid-afternoon with a full camera rig and reporter, planning to do a feature on the bizarre but brilliant viral phenomenon. I welcomed them, showed them the golf cart coupe, introduced them to Beacons, and even let the reporter hold one of the fluffier hens, Yoko Ono. We were mid-interview when we all heard the shrill voice in the distance. Karen. Marching down the sidewalk like she owned the entire county, waving her fake legal papers and screaming about theft, fraud, and animal abuse. The camera crew turned. The reporter's eyes lit up. The chaos had arrived. Karen stormed into the shot, yelling that everything I'd built was based on a stolen vehicle. She pointed at the golf cart and said, "That belongs to me and you've turned it into a chicken-infested nightmare." The reporter calmly asked her name and if she had a moment to explain her side. That was the worst possible question. She lit up like a firework, launching into a monologue about HOA tyranny, neighborhood neglect, and how she was the victim of internet bullying. As she ranted, one of the chickens hopped onto the cart's roof and laid an egg directly into a flower pot Karen had planted last month and placed near the barn. Symbolic, poetic, and perfect. Then came the twist. Right as Karen was demanding that the cart be returned to her immediately, a clucking noise erupted from inside it, loud, distressed, and unmistakable. Everyone turned as Beacons burst out from the front seat in full mama hen mode. She'd laid her eggs in the cup holder over the past week, and now she had apparently decided to brood. She leapt from the cart and ran straight at Karen, flapping and shrieking like a feathery war goddess. Karen tried to dodge, slipped on a patch of hay, and crashed to the ground in front of the news crew, covered in feathers and clutching a broken high heel. The camera caught it all in glorious HD. The moment Karen realized the camera was rolling on her downfall was when her face twisted into something between horror and theatrical denial. She tried to cover the lens with her hand. The reporter said, "Ma'am, please don't touch the equipment." A sheriff's deputy arrived within 10 minutes, apparently called in by a neighbor who saw Karen approaching with a large bag and feared more vandalism. The deputy, the same one who'd warned her last time, took one look at the scene and said, "Again? Seriously?" Karen tried to argue she was reclaiming her cart. The deputy asked for proof of ownership. She pulled out a wrinkled document that was little more than a receipt from a golf outlet store. It had no serial number, no identification, just the words, "Golf cart model A" written in faded ink. The deputy turned to me. I calmly handed over all the previous sheriff's reports, video footage, and documentation of every time she'd been warned, trespassed, or vandalized my property. The deputy sighed, told her she was in violation of multiple property codes, and detained her on the spot. As she was being walked back to the cruiser, she screamed one last time, "This isn't over. It's just the beginning." That line made it into the news report, edited with slow-motion footage of Beacons flapping her wings. The news piece aired the next night, under the headline, "Local Man Turns Golf Cart into Viral Chicken Coop, HOA Mayhem Ensues." Karen's fall was complete. The footage went viral again. This time, national outlets picked it up. Talk shows debated it. A popular YouTube channel did a reaction video. One of the chickens, Cluck Norris, had his own meme line now. The next week, I got a certified letter from the county stating that the golf cart, due to prolonged abandonment and repeated legal filings, had been declared abandoned personal property and was now officially mine. I framed the letter and hung it next to a photo of Beacons sitting in the driver's seat wearing her chicken sunglasses. Karen eventually stopped showing up. Whether it was from shame, legal restrictions, or just sheer exhaustion, nobody knew. Her house went up for sale a month later, listed as a quiet home in a quirky community. No mention of the chicken incident. But everyone knew. I kept the barn open for visitors once a month, let the community drop by, meet the hens, take photos, and grab eggs. The live streams stayed up and strong. Sponsors increased. Merchandise expanded. Someone even sent a tiny chicken throne for Beacons, which I mounted right on top of the cart's dashboard. In the end, Karen's entitled rage became a full-blown local legend. Her cart, transformed by petty revenge and poultry persistence, now stood as a monument to what happens when arrogance meets a creative neighbor with a barn and a livestream setup. All she had to do was park somewhere else. Instead, she handed me the greatest story of my life. And for that, I'll always be grateful. So will the chickens. Especially Beacons. She never missed a single morning to perch triumphantly atop the cart and cluck like she owned the whole world. Because after everything, in a way, she kind of did.